Our next guest has played a vital role in politics over the last few years. Her handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and a summer of civil unrest has launched her to the forefront of the conversation. Please welcome the 60th mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms.
Hello, thank you.
Welcome, Mayor Bottoms. Hello.
It is such an honor to have you join us today, especially at such a pivotal moment in our history. The country is obviously still reeling from the lack of charges brought against the officers involved in the Breonna Taylor shooting. And just as a former attorney and a judge, how do you feel about the Kentucky Attorney General's decision?
You know, when I watched the press conference, I was left with a lot of questions. And the first thing I said aloud to someone was that it didn't sound like to me he had presented all of the options before the grand jury. And that's really what's being borne out. So I would like to see what was presented to the grand jury. I believe that he should have released the transcripts at the same time that he made the announcement. That certainly would have given us some answers over the past several days. But like so many people, it is it's hurtful because in light of all that we have experienced over the past several months, it still feels like the lives of African Americans are being devalued. And I can't imagine what still having these answers are like for the family. So I just want to know what was presented and to at least understand how the grand jury made its decision.
Well, earlier this week, the Kentucky Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, did agree to release the grand jury tapes after one of the jurors accused him of using the grand jury as a shield to deflect accountability. What do you think about this development?
I think that he should release it. This way, we can all see what was presented to the grand jury, and I think that it should have been done simultaneously.
Absolutely.
I completely agree.
It is truly an honor to have you on the show. There's so much unrest, and many people feel defeated right now. Where do we go from here?
What I would just remind people is that we are not the first generation that's faced hardships. There have been so many generations before us, going back hundreds of years even, who've been able to face hardships and get to the other side. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't experience all the hurt and the pain and frustration that we are experiencing, but we are resilient. We are a resilient country. We are a resilient people, and we can get to the other side, but we won't get to the other side by not being thoughtful. We can look back just 50 years to the civil rights movement and all that it took for us to make meaningful change in this country. And this is about being thoughtful, being level-headed, and keeping our eye on the prize. And that's what we have to do today.
That's right.
You know what I like about you, Mayor Bottoms, is that when all of this unrest, and especially during the pandemic, you would give your conferences, and you would make me feel like, you know what, I got to get myself together. You became that mother, and I just want to thank you for that, because you was letting them have it, which they needed to. But these shootings and the protests, you know, they've affected you personally, not only as the mayor of Atlanta, but how have they affected you as a Black woman?
Well, the reason you got to see me as a mother is because that's what I am all day, every day. And even when I go out, a lot of times I'm getting it in real time in my kitchen. And it's mostly from my 18-year-old because he wears it all. He wears the anger, the frustration. And even with my younger kids, I see the hope and I see them looking to me to be reassuring. And so that's what I bring. I bring when I'm out in public. But I feel all of the things that everybody else is feeling because I worry about my children and my family. And what I know is when I send my kids out and when my husband goes out, nobody cares that they're related to the mayor of Atlanta. They're going out as Black boys and men in America and all that entails. So I want for my community the same things that I want for my family, and that's for them to be safe, for them to be healthy, and for them to be whole.
There has been a loud outcry to defund the police. Are you in favor of that?
I'm not in favor of that, but I am in favor of us reimagining policing in our communities. I support our police officers, but what I don't support is an excessive use of force. And so in Atlanta, we are already closing our jail. We are reallocating our corrections budget to make sure that we have money to put towards programming, and so that we can create a facility that people can walk in off of the street and get GED training, 24-hour child care, vocational training, all the things that people need in our communities. There's a thoughtful way to do it with our budgets. But the reality is this: when something bad happens in our communities, we look to our police to help us with those problems. We did it. My family did it a few years ago when my 18-year-old nephew was murdered. So there's value in our public safety partners, but in the same way that we want our partners to respect our communities, it has to be a mutual respect. And I think there's a way to do it, and we're already working on that in Atlanta. But I don't like this idea of defunding the police. We need to reimagine policing.
And I want to say something because when during the unrest, Atlanta was one of the few cities that actually, when there was issues with the police, you guys actually went in and you did immediate action on that. You did not hesitate. Yeah. Either the officers were let go, or there was some action, and I think that's what we want. How do you feel about that, having that immediate action?
That's what our communities are crying out for. That's what we've been seeing over the last several months. We don't have the luxury of time. Even in Atlanta, we had just started working on looking at our policies, and not even 2 days later, we had a police-involved shooting in Atlanta. We don't have the luxury of time. So we're continuing to press forward with that. We did it with many of our progressive partners leading the way, but also getting input from the community as a whole and getting input from our police officers, because at the end of the day, it's about a partnership. Our communities want to be safe, and our officers want to be able to safely return home to their families at the end of the day.
Now, your husband and one of your sons all came down with the case of COVID over the summer. How are you guys feeling now?
Much better, but we are a typical story where we had an asymptomatic teenager in the house, and it was transmitted to my husband and I. And just as a reminder that, and my son is pretty thoughtful most of the time, but it's just this reminder of how people who aren't as healthy and as strong can be impacted. But my husband went in pretty healthy. He still wakes up with migraine headaches every day and has these unexpected bouts of fatigue. So people have to take this seriously. They got to continue to wear their masks and be thoughtful about people who may not be able to fight it off in the way that some young, very healthy people are able to.
Agree.
Atlanta just entered phase 2 of the reopening, but we see some disturbing footage. They still popping bottles over there, Mayor Bottoms. And are you frustrated with this? Because they're not taking it serious.
I know. I got some footage this weekend, and the person who sent it to me, who shall remain nameless, it was a celebrity, sent it to me but wouldn't tell me where it was, because I wanted to send some people in to address it, or at least pass out some. You should have. But, it is baffling to me that people don't take this seriously. And what's happening in Atlanta and in our state is what's happening across the country. Black and brown communities are hitting hardest in Georgia right now. Yes. Our brown communities are experiencing the highest rate of infections, but African Americans are still dying at a higher rate than anybody else. So while you're
Why do you think we're not listening? I'm curious, though. Why do you think we're not listening to the statistics or what you're saying, what everybody's been saying? I'm baffled by it.
It's a detachment from reality. We don't want to accept that we're in the midst of a pandemic and things are bad and this is death. That we want to pretend as if it's not so. But the reality is you're taking it home to your parents, to your grandparents, and people who have asthma and high blood pressure and all these underlying health conditions. And many people don't even know they have these underlying health conditions. But at the end of the day, it's just selfish.
Agree.
Yes.
I agree.
Absolutely agree. Now, I am really impressed with the action that you've taken to fight human trafficking. The work that you're doing in Atlanta and its airports is one of the best examples of a well-communicated hub to alert trained officials of trafficking behavior. So I want to ask, when traveling opens back up, how can we as passengers be a part of the solution when it comes to spotting trafficking?
It's about being able to recognize it, because I've had my own experience with being around someone who I was pretty sure this person was being exploited and not knowing what to do in that moment. And so we want to make sure that people are informed so that they know what to look for. And then they also know who to call and how to respond to it, because quite often it is happening right before our eyes. But in my situation, I felt completely helpless and paralyzed in that moment. And you often only get one opportunity to respond when you see someone who may be exploited. And so that's what we're trying to do at the world's busiest airport, and making sure that as people go back to their respective cities and their countries, that they can also know what to look for and know how to respond to it.
So happy
So
you're doing
great.
that. I have
So
to
great.
ask you, Biden pledged earlier on to select a female running mate, and you were on the top of his list as potentials. Were you disappointed that, you weren't his pick for vice president?
I sure was. I was disappointed, but
That's real.
I think that he was a great pick, and I've always said that my wish is that he would put whomever on that ticket would best help him beat Donald Trump. And I know that he's made a great pick in Senator Harris. But personally, I was disappointed, but that's just because I'm pretty competitive. So I still have
I love that spirit. I love that. Now, would you be willing to take a role in his cabinet, though?
We discussed that. I would never say never, but I have a pretty big job and pretty spectacular job right now. So right now, the most important part is for him to win, and then we'll see what the future brings.
Great.
Well, in 2019, you actually endorsed Biden long before he became the party's nominee. Why is he such a clear choice for you as the person who can beat Donald Trump?
I said back last year, we know Joe, and the best part is Congressman Clyburn has reminded us is that Joe knows us. And for me, it really was my best polling and focus group is my family, my mother. When I saw that my mother was not wavering, when I would ask my family who they were supporting, they never once wavered from Joe Biden. And so much of that has to do with his long and established representation of us in Congress, and also watching him alongside Barack Obama. And it was never lost on me that this was an older white man who was willing to stand beside and behind our first African-American president and give him all the support that he needed, and just the respect and regard, not just for people of color, but for women across this country. And so I am still so proud to support him, and I still know that he is the best choice, but people have to show up and vote.
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mayor Bottoms, thank you
you,
so much for
Sarah.
your time. Thank you for speaking with us and encouraging us. Keep doing what you're doing and putting up the good fight.